Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host, Bryan. We're going to move on with today with a special selection, which is where one of you tell me exactly what it is I need to check out, and I do it. If you have your own special selection that you'd like to submit, you can find a link to do so in the description below. Today's special selection comes at us from John. It says, my request is a band called Windir. They've become a legendary folk black metal band. Tragically, the songwriter vocalist died right after their fourth album was released when he got lost in a snowstorm between his and his parents' cabin. The band is very melodic, and I look forward to your analysis of it. John also let me know that it was about this person here, Sverre of Norway. He was a ruler in Norwegian history from 1184 to 1202. So I did a little bit of reading about him before diving into this track. It's called Fagning. Maybe Fagning? I don't know. Might be a soft day. Let's dig into this and see what Windir's bringing to the table, though. What? That's interesting. Heavy layer of fuzz above all of this, but I do like how I can hear the bass. It's prominent in the mix. Yeah, this is a very fun black metal. Very interesting galloping rhythm there. This is just so much fun. And it retains that brutality, even with the melodic presence. What is that offbeat cymbal work that we just heard? This is a really interesting idea to pair with the black metal aesthetic. Bringing a lot of victory into this. It's a very triumphant section. Beautiful counterpoint. Yeah, bringing in some groove too. Really nice embellishing idea on the bass kicks, adding double bass at the end of the string of eighths. So good. It's over? It can't be over. Oh, good. We got a couple minutes. There's that offbeat cymbal hit again. Yeah. It's a wonderful blend of textures. For a moment there, I thought they were going to fade out the metal instruments and keep some strings, which I don't even remember if they had strings throughout, but it kind of felt like what they were going to do, and transition the electric guitars to violins, and have that transition, and then have the violins finish out the riff and end in a chordal resolution. That's kind of where I thought that was going. Interesting. So this is an odd one. I don't know if anybody else feels the same way. I think it's interesting that John listed this as folk black metal. I think that order is very important to understanding what's going on here. The folk aspect to me is more important. This does have black metal styling. So we have the tremolo picking, we have the heavy fuzz, we have the constant drum attack pattern in a few sections. But they're not the lead elements. They're sort of they're used secondary to types of composition tools that exist in opposition to those. They are secondary to the primary elements of melody writing. And so it creates this identity of a folk song with black metal leaning, or a folk metal song with black metal leanings. There really are only a handful of parts in here that feel full on black metal to me. A majority of the song doesn't. It utilizes the atmosphere. Sorry, utilizes the atmosphere and the sound of black metal, the feeling of black metal, but it utilizes those as textural ideas and not so much the composition ideas that black metal is known for. Instead, it uses compositional ideas that come from folk metal and thus folk. We have a lot of melody lines. We have a lot of uplifting melody lines. We don't really have anything that works on some of the bluesier, more pensive or thoughtful elements that metal typically utilizes. A lot of this is brighter. It's happier. It's uplifting. There's adventure. There's conquest and victory in these melody lines. And it also introduces counterpoint, which is very popular in a lot of European folk music. And we see these elements being introduced into the black metal sound, not into the black metal composition. And I absolutely love it. I don't mind the sound of black metal. Lo-fi stuff, I think, kind of pushes it for my ears. And this does have a little bit of that lo-fi element, but overall, I enjoy the texture of what black metal goes for. It's just a little too much of the same thing for me. I'm sure there's some progressive or more avant-garde black metal out there that does stuff like this, where it incorporates more variety, especially auditory variety, to the black metal sound. But when we've checked out black metal in the past, a lot of it tends to be very similar from start to finish. We saw this during Black Metal Origins Week, especially the bands that, what was it, Celtic Frost, I think, that was more closer to what I associate with black metal. But a lot of this comes from that earlier extreme metal, I think is what it was, speed metal. That really is more focused on the feeling and the atmosphere of the song. It's not about having a lot of sections or introducing a lot of melodic ideas. It's about that aggression, that speed, just the overall aesthetic of the sound. It's more of a sonoristic approach than one based on melody. So this, I think, is a really interesting direction to take it, and one that suits my ears a little better. Now, I think the first thing I do want to talk about, though, is trying to think of a good order to go through this so there's some flow to the analysis rather than this section and this section and this section. And I think it is just going to be a bit more of a segmented approach to this, just looking at things that stuck out to me. So we're going to start with melody. The song starts out and we have the constant attacks in the tremolo picking, the constant attacks in the bass kick and snare. The bass guitar is doing its thing. I don't remember if we have vocals yet. And I remember thinking, okay, not my jam, but I know what I'm in store for. We got 8 minutes ahead of us, Let's focus in. Let's see if they're doing anything interesting, or if they're just kind of going to adhere to this format that a lot of black metal does. I noticed immediately a lot of the fuzz that was all over the place, very typical for black metal. A lot of destructive elements on the audio to destroy, or another way would, I think, is cover up, not necessarily destroy. There are some destructive elements to it, like overdrive. I think destroys timbre, but there's also an element of covering up the original timbre with this fuzz, with this crackling. That's that overdrive. That's that compression. Um, so there's definitely this layer of fuzz above everything in here. But it's not super lo-fi. I think there's still a lot of clarity going on with the instrumentation. Which I thought, little neat. I can hear everything clearly. It still has the black metal fuzz on it. Uh, and then that first sparse section came in. I can't remember if this was before or after the vocals came in, but when the vocals came in, they just kind of solidified the idea that this is black metal stuff, right? Pretty typical black metal, harsh vocal there. But then that first quiet part came in, and that was when I got my first taste of, hey, things might be different here. So it was sparse, not just in instrumentation, which I remember there was a guitar. The bass was very prominent in the section. It was kind of hard to hear the bass in the louder sections, but here it shone through just a bit. And I think it's because a lot of the other stuff got out of the way, but it was still difficult to hear. And I think a lot of that just comes down to the fuzziness that's on it. Whereas with the guitars and the vocals, it feels like the fuzz is above the sound of the instrument, and you just kind of got to dig down a little bit and you can hear it. But with the bass, it feels like the fuzz is all around it and it's pushing through the fuzz to be heard. And it makes it more difficult to hear for me. But I liked it here. I had an opportunity to listen to the bass. I think it had an interesting tone, and the idea of trying to poke through the fuzz rather than being buried in it is an interesting timbre, and it makes me wonder if that's something that happens in a lot of black metal, since this is very typical, I would say, of the production quality of the black metal I've heard. I don't think I get a lot of chances to listen to an isolated bass in black metal songs. So it's interesting. That might be one of the reasons why I have such difficulty overall hearing bass in black metal as a genre. But yeah, so we had this section, but it wasn't just the bass or the sparseness of it. There is this odd feeling of creeping darkness. Like being at a campfire in the middle of the night, and the flames of the campfire are, they're surrounding you in light, but just at the edge of it, it's darkness in all directions, 360 degrees around you. And that's kind of what I got here, is a very narrow sound, and I could feel a lack of spatial placement in a full 360 degree sphere. It was narrow horizontally. Like all the sound that we had heard is now very narrow. Vertically, very narrow. And even depth wise, it just felt like this little pocket of music where we had just heard a rather full sound sphere. So it's very interesting how they went about doing that. It really made me feel alone. I'm not sure if that's what they were going for, but the production on that was really interesting. That was the first time that I felt I was in store for something interesting. But then I think it was the very next section, and we had a lead melodic guitar. We definitely had a guitar riffing on chords, or maybe just single notes. Tremolo picking is probably single notes. Underneath, we had the guitar, the bass, the drums. The vocalist was present, fitting into the mix. Very typical of black metal, having the vocalist pushed down into the mix and kind of feeling like just another texture in the music. But then we had this soaring guitar melody line that had adventure to it, had this bright quality. And it didn't really have all the fuzz on it that everything else did. It was still a fuzzy tone. It fit in with the black metal sound very well, but it was more prominent, more clean, and a little bit more of itself. It wasn't as fuzzy. It didn't have as much destruction or deterioration of the original timbre in it as the rhythm guitars did. Or the I mean, it might have been the same guitarist who was doing rhythm guitar earlier, but just switched to a new tone. But this new tone had cleanliness to it. It was not as weighed down by the burden of the fuzz. Um, and it was playing this very upbeat, very catchy melody. And, part of me thought it should have been contrasting with the music underneath it. And I still find it odd that it wasn't. A lot of black metal tends to have this weight. It's about the oppression of the distortion. It's about the oppression of the constant attacks, the tremolo picking, the eighth or 16th beat drum kicks, the constant snare hits. We're not emphasizing 2 and 4. A lot of black metal emphasizes every downbeat. So it's about this constant oppression from the wall of sound, and here we have an instrument soaring above that, being very fun and carefree. Definitely has direction to it. There's a strong sense of momentum to the melody line, but it's really not concerned about the weight that the rest of the band is implying through its production and its technique. And I enjoyed that. I really did. And this carried over into the next section, which I think is the chorus. And this is where, once again, we get this really strong guitar line over these other ideas. I think this is also where the chorus came in. I mean, the drums came in with that interesting galloping. The galloping starts at the beginning of the bar. We get a gallop in beat 1. I apologize again. We have the gallop in beat 1, and then the gallop in the end of 3 into 4, I think is how that works. Maybe it was just 4. No, because there was a gap between we hit that downbeat 1 again. So I think it was the end of 3. Just this interesting offbeat galloping idea. It wasn't the standard metal gallop where you gallop on 1 and then have a standard, a quarter note on 2, and then the gallop on 3 and the quarter note on 4. And you get this very nice, divisible, symmetrical galloping feel throughout. This was disjointed in a bit. And instead of having that hit in between the gallops, which would have been on 2 and 4 in the more standardized one, I think there was space in the bass kicks, just like a beat and a half of rest or something. Really interesting way to basically take all of the weight and intensity that we had seen in the previous section and reduce it down, right? I don't think we're doing tremolo picking at this point anymore. We don't have the eighth note bass kicks that are constantly going. I think the snare switched off from every downbeat to every other downbeat, or maybe it was just one hit every bar or something. But everybody kind of reined in the speed that they're playing and put more space between their notes. And it really took the oppression off, that aggression, and lightened everything up. That paired well with that lead guitar line that goes through here as well. Just really phenomenal stuff. And this isn't, of course, the only case, because I believe it's right after this, or maybe we do verse chorus again, and then we go into the next section. But we have a bit of a counterpoint. I really thought it was just one guitar that kind of got panned further right, and then a left pan guitar kind of comes in, and they start playing around with ideas, right? We have 2 lead melody lines playing simultaneously, doing their own things, but interweaving with each other. This is counterpoint, or counter melody is another way, another term that's utilized for it. It's when you have 2 melody lines, though, or more. You can have as many layers of melody as you want, but it's counterpoint. You have your lead one, and you have your counter to your lead, another melody. And these guys, I think, do a fantastic job of laying down these beautiful dyadic movements, both of them, move moments. Where both of these instruments are doing their own thing, but the notes that they're playing together are providing almost a third idea, and it is just as gorgeous. I love both ideas on their own. I love the sound of them together. I love when they're both hit notes on the same beat and the sounds that they create there. There's a lot of attention to detail about when they share a downbeat, especially when they both begin a note on the same downbeat, and the note relationships that are being placed there. And the progression of these note relationships are not always the same distance apart, the two notes. So it creates this other sound that comes from the conjoining of these two ideas, hearing them simultaneously instead of as two opposing ideas. And of course, they're not always hitting the same notes at the same beat, so you also get this sort of back and forth sound, and just the way it all comes together is gorgeous. Now, I think they do utilize the same melody, counter melody idea in every one of these sections. It's repeated 2 more times, so we have 3 times hearing it total. I don't think there are 3 sets of unique melodies. I'm pretty sure they took this one that works phenomenally and just repeated it in the next 2 times. But I don't think that diminishes from it at all. In fact, by the third time it came around, I was still hearing new ideas in it, new ways that the two lines are interacting with each other. And it just kind of deepened my appreciation for what they were doing. I don't think that it was an accident. I firmly believe that they could have written 2 more unique ideas that would have worked just as well, been just as beautiful. But sometimes the repetition is what drives a section forward. And like I said, right here, it allowed me to get a second and third listen to it and really hone in what I was enjoying about it. And for that, I'm thankful. I especially after having listened to so many songs this week with Haken and all the mathcore stuff, just always throwing something new at me. Uh, just in contrast to that, it's a really good week, I think, to have something that has a lot of repetition to it that I can really dig into and get a full appreciation for. Now, the melody wasn't only played by the guitars. We also had a couple of moments of clean vocal harmonies, and these kind of caught me off guard. Especially after having the black metal vocals primarily up until the first time, which must have been in the middle of the song somewhere, maybe about minute 3 or 4. I kind of figured that those were the vocals we were going to have. The music brought in folk elements, but the vocals didn't, and that would have been fine, honestly. So when they came in, it was an interesting aspect, but it was also sort of a diversion. They had this 2 bar vocal harmony maybe, and then that was it. We kind of went back to the other thing. But that wasn't the only folk element that they introduced. The second time that these vocals came in, it was during a section where we had something. It kind of sounds like, and I think a lot of this is just from the production kind of destroying or deteriorating the core timbre of these instruments, but it kind of sounds like a harmonica meets a bagpipe, and I'm not sure what it is. It could also just be a Norwegian folk instrument that I'm not aware of as well. It might not have anything to do with the production, but it was a bit fuzzy. I couldn't quite land what the sound exactly was, but that came in with the melody as well, and I really enjoyed that. I thought it was cool to bring in these folk elements into the music as well. The clean vocal harmonies also kind of had a bit of a group vocal vibe to it. It wasn't exactly a vertical layering of notes. It was more of a group of people. It had width to it, and there was a bit of an echo, like being in a large hall, that kind of widened this harmonized vocal section a bit. And again, it just kind of feels folky to me, and I really enjoyed that. And I think that's going to kind of lead me into my next section, which is sort of where the melody takes the vibe. So I mentioned that the opening minute or two, all the black metal ideas are used compositionally and production wise, provides or creates this oppressive element to it. The atmosphere feels heavy. But as soon as the lead guitar comes in that first time, it lightens everything up. It sits above the rest of the band. It's providing a melody line that's kind of adventurous in some ways. It is brighter. It's more optimistic about whatever's going to be happening. A lot more so than that weight and oppression the rest of the band was playing at the time. And it's this sort of optimism that goes through a lot of the rest of the song once this part kicks in and we move away from that pure black metal sound and begin to incorporate the folk elements. We hear moments of unity, like in the group vocals. We hear adventure, we hear conquest, we hear victory. There was a line like 6 minutes in, we were pretty close to the end, but we weren't in the final section yet, and the guitar begins to play something that feels akin to victory. And we go through all of these more positive atmospheres primarily through the melody. The rhythm guitars, the vocals, aside from the cleans, the drumming, the bass, a lot of those are laying down this more oppressive black metal feeling, especially in the rhythm guitar with the notes that they're playing, that they're tremolo picking. If we don't look at them as individual instruments, but we look at them as whole notes and changing every bar, they're not exactly playing something that's uplifting. It carries the weight of black metal with it. It carries some of the more pensive, thoughtful elements that I kind of associate with black metal's chord progressions. And we have this element of victory, of adventure, of conquest being played against this more pensive, melancholic kind of chord progressions. And I don't know if it's that they are choosing their notes very carefully to ensure that we don't hear too much dissonance from the contrasting keys or modes, or if the two are actually just not that far different and they are, just purposely keeping the two troublesome notes away from each other. But it's really interesting to hear how they have both of these ideas present simultaneously without it feeling disjointed. In fact, it never really feels at ends with or at odds with each other at all. The two sections exist very harmoniously throughout the song. And it's just a really interesting combination of ideas, but it's also interesting how infectious that positive, adventurous element becomes. The drums halfway through basically give up entirely on the double bass kicks, aside from the outro, I think it was. And we begin seeing more upbeat drum patterns. We go from ditching the double bass kicks for these gallops. And even when we return to something more symmetrical, it is sort of, more of a rock feel, or even maybe a punk feel. And then, of course, we get that section with the offbeat cymbal hits, right? So we have this rigid downbeats idea going on in the guitars, in the vocals, but and the snare and bass too, I think. And then on the cymbals, we have this nice upbeat kind of vibe that makes you kind of want to bounce up and down. And it provides this electric energy to the song that's not oppressive, but engaging. And then I don't know if the rhythm guitar gets changed too much. I'd have to listen to it again to hear that. But even the vocals, when the group vocals come in the second time, it's not just a 2-bar affair. They stick around for a while. That lead melody, that folk aspect in the lead guitar that we hear about a minute and a half in, slowly infects the rest of the song until it is also on the same page and has brought itself out of the depths, the weight of the black metal, and has brightened itself up and is more optimistic, more positive about the outlook of the future. And it all sort of comes together because of, well, it all comes together because of that lead guitar part. But it's interesting just to hear the evolution over the song, and it's almost like an 8 minute crossfade of genres, where we start out pure black metal, slowly introduce folk elements, and end the song a lot more folkier than we started. We haven't ditched the black metal entirely. We still have the production style of it, but the compositional techniques are far and few between. Up until the last half minute or whatever with the fade out, that went pure black metal again, if I remember correctly. But like I said, in my head, I heard that fade out being a transition into possibly that harmonica bagpipe sound, or even something a little more tropey like a violin, or even a lute if we're going to stick with the folk element. And transitioning the same chord progression that they're tremolo picking into held out notes on this folk instrument, and then fading that out or landing on a resolution is actually how I heard it in my head. And I think that would have fit really well. And I think that's everything that I wanted to touch on. Um, it's not extremely complicated or complex on a musical level, but I really love the way that they dance between these two genres. And also, play with expectations. I really figured we were in for an 8 minute black metal track, more of a stereotypical black metal sound. And instead, I got a fun folk song with an interesting texture to it. And I really enjoyed that. Right? This is a fun song to kind of jam along to. Oh, the lyrics I do want to touch on real quick. They're not English. I don't know what they are. I don't know what's going on with the lyrics, but I did read in the Wikipedia page that this dude was a bit short, and he often directed his troops in battles from horseback to kind of give him a little bit more height. I don't know if that was to seem more intimidating or to seem taller, if it was just to help him actually, see the battle to give orders or whatever. But I think it's interesting that we had that galloping idea in here that wasn't tied to any genre. Like, there's definitely some genres that have the galloping feel to them, just kind of baked into genre. Expected genre tropes as far as we're looking at rhythmic ideas. This one kind of seemed to come out of nowhere and wasn't a standard symmetrical gallop. So I don't know if that was done because of this little tidbit. It was one of the things that I noticed. He also had innovative tactics, it says, and I guess was a good strategist, military strategist, um, that made his people more, it says, mobile and adaptable in combat based on some of the things he had come up with. And I doubt that this is entirely tied into the sound, but I really enjoy the adaptability and innovativeness of of this song. The way that it balances these two ideas and gives me a familiar sound in both rights, but when unified, a unique identity with this new folk black genre. So those are my thoughts on Windir, Fagning, Fagning. I don't know, man. You guys can let me know about that translate or not translation, pronunciation if you would like. Um, this is where you guys come in though. Hit me up. Let me know what's going on in your mind, if you enjoyed this or not. Anything that stuck out to you, anything that I didn't touch on. If you have a translation for the lyrics, hit me up with that. And that might, like I said, increase some of my appreciation for what's going on here. I'd be able to tie the lyrics into some of the musical ideas. Um, when you're done commenting, you can head up to the description box, and there's a link for Linktree. which is a fantastic resource for everything related to the channel. It takes you to this menu right here. You can join the Patreon. You can follow me on Twitter. You can join the Discord community. You can pick up some merch and just a ton of other things in there. Above the description box, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I greatly appreciate all three of those. That wraps it up for today. I'll be back tomorrow at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 10 p.m. UTC as usual. We'll be looking at our penultimate math core band for the week and our final special selection, since as usual Friday we'll be doing creators request in this slot. Alright, until next time, remember to be critical but not cynical of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening whenever you choose to watch my videos.